We're back. So NSLI-Y semi-finalist results just came out. If you got accepted, congratulations. If you didn't, that's okay. Just apply again next year. This video is mainly for those of you who are lost, confused, scared, or all of the above. When it comes to NSLI-Y and or college application interviews, it's so easy to get stuck in the mud and think about every little detail, and that kind of waters down your confidence in your ability to move on to the next round. It is actually not that hard once you get the hang of the style of interviewing and also just how to approach it. For my fellow first-gen low-income students out there, this one's for you. You should first review everything you said in your application. Your essays, your stats, your extracurriculars, all that stuff, they're going to be asking you about that because you wrote it. You should know what you wrote in your essays, why you wrote what you wrote in your essays, why you're applying, and also be able to elaborate on any extracurriculars and any classes that you took relevant to the organization. In a college interview, they'll most likely ask you something about your favorite extracurricular and why that means so much to you, or even just like a class that you took in the past that really had a good impact on you. In any of these situations, you want to be able to talk not just, oh, well, I did this activity. You want to be able to elaborate why you did, the impact of your work, especially the impact. So for NSLI specifically, many alumni have already shared previous interview questions in their blogs or in their videos, so I'm sure you can find a plethora of those online. Of course, each question is going to be different from previous year cycles, but generally they have the same idea of what kind of student will you be on the program, how would you handle XYZ situations, and overall your reason and dedication to learning the critical language. So to give you an idea of what kind of questions they might ask, I'm just going to go over some of the questions that I highlighted and I used to practice with. For personal questions, they would typically ask stuff like, what kind of role do you play within your group of friends? Or have you ever been in a group where you felt out of place? Another kind of question they may ask you is more academic. So where do you hope to go into college? What kind of volunteering or service you've done, if any. Sometimes if you work in 20 hours a week, you don't got time to volunteer like me. Don't sweat it if you don't do every single thing that NSLI asks for. There's also program related questions. For example, describe your ideal host family. What are 2 goals you have for the program other than learning the language? These are all very general questions you can expect to be asked by your interviewer, and among other questions, you should be able to prepare for that and not try to memorize every single answer you have for each question, but rather being able to train your brain to think how to respond to certain questions. And of course, some other miscellaneous questions are, how strict are your parents at home? What would you do if your parents in their host country was less or more strict? So those are just some of the questions that they may ask you, but again, they may ask you more or less depending on how your interview goes. So don't just follow along with what I say, do your own research and see how you can prepare for the NSLI interview as well. So unlike college interviews where you're talking mostly about the school and why you're a good academic fit, for NSLI, it's a lot more about your behavior throughout the program and how you will learn the language and give back, etc., etc. So of course, they're going to be asking a lot of behavioral questions. The method that I personally use to answer my behavioral questions is called the SORT method. It's also called the STAR method by some, but I personally prefer SORT because that's what Google uses apparently. The STAR method stands for situation, task, action, results, and the SORT method stands for situation, obstacle, action, result, and takeaway. The two are pretty similar in terms of concept. You're basically breaking down the scenario for a behavioral question, showing your thought process, what you did to resolve it, and also what you learned from it. The reason why I prefer SORT over STAR is because that takeaway line, it really ties into what did you learn from this experience and how will that tie in to your current endeavor, aka NSLI. If your interviewer is asking you a question about, say, how would you respond in this scenario with your host family, you want to be able to give real-life examples of when you were in a similar situation and how you overcame that situation. This method is more suitable for job applications where they ask behavioral questions, but totally applies to NSLI and college interviews as well. If you didn't know, there's also an unofficial applicant group chat for NSLI where they hold mock interviews over Discord. So if you're looking for someone to practice these questions with, which I highly recommend you do, while it's good to practice answering these interview questions, it's even more important to practice them with someone one-on-one during mock interviews. After you have taken a look at potential questions you may be asked, you want to be able to practice those questions with someone like a friend or a teacher in a mock interview simulation. So basically, you would sit here, they sit here, and they're asking you rapid fire questions. maybe not rapid fire, but they're asking you questions, simulating the live interview. You have to actually be in the zone and really immerse yourself in answering those questions. This is really good if you have stress or any sort of anxiety right before an interview, because it prepares you for all the potential curveballs they may throw at you. I would recommend having a blank copy of all the questions you think you may be asked or have been used in the past, and send it to your friend or your mentor for them to interview you with. Next, I'm just going to move on to the more college specific questions. Before you do any kind of research on your college interview, you should take a look at the college's CDS or Common Data Set. Not all colleges will have this, but majority do. And when you look at the profile and scroll down to see how they evaluate applicants, there should be a section specifically for interviews. That will tell you if it's really important in the application, not at all important, or not even considered. I highly recommend you look at that because it will tell you how much you should actually put time and effort into the interview, because you don't want to put all your time into something that isn't going to be looked at. So for example, Barnard College of Columbia University says that the interview is considered. However, for USC, they don't actually offer interviews until you are in the merit scholarship / trustee scholarship stage, where they will interview you for a specific scholarship. If you don't have a friend or a teacher or a parent that you can ask, what I do is I just search up mock interview simulations on YouTube, and there should be some kind of guy or person asking you pretend questions, and they have a timer in the corner that kind of times you on how well you're doing. Granted, they're not exactly the same questions that you'll be asked on an interview, but it is still good practice for you to get familiar with the style of interviews and also with interviewing for a scholarship or for college. It's very important that you look at what kind of interview is being held and how will it be evaluated. A lot of colleges would do alumni interviews where past alumni at the school will interview you, and that way it's a lot more casual than, say, a formal scholarship committee. No matter what kind of interview you are doing, it's important to be prepared, but not over-prepared. This can look like researching your interviewer beforehand. If they have a LinkedIn profile or some kind of portfolio website, you can actually look up their full name if given and try to see if you have any connections with them that you can talk about during your actual college interview. If you're going to stalk anyone in LinkedIn, do it in private browsing mode. Promise. Don't make your answers seem robotic, and try to really take a step back and reflect on what is being asked. When I personally interview people, I expect them to take a pause and be like, that's a really good question, and think about it, because it shows that you're reflecting on what is being asked and you're trying to come up with a genuine response, versus trying to read off a script and try to get the interview over with because you're terrified. It's okay to have a list of talking points where you just have a couple of phrases or sentences that you know for sure you want to say in the interview, but don't write out everything because that's just a lot of work on your end, and it doesn't really prepare you for the reality of an interview, because if they ask you a really offhanded question that you weren't prepared for, you're gonna be like, and then not know what to respond. If some time has passed between the time you applied and the time you're conducting the interview, and you won some kind of major award or did some kind of cool extracurricular, feel free to mention that, because it shows that you're updating them on your progress and you're not going to stop just because applications are over. Other than that, I would say smile during your interview. Try to have fun where you can. I know it can be very anxious, but when you really vibe with your interviewer, it really reflects well on the conversation, and it's more likely for them to actually recommend you to the next stage. I've personally done a lot of interviews back in high school for my podcast, and I can tell sometimes when an interviewee isn't really passionate or they're just really shy and they don't really feel like engaging in the conversation. So that's it for the video. If you have any other questions, comment them down below or shoot me a DM on Instagram. I don't really check email that often, so if I don't respond to you, it's nothing personal. Best of luck to those of you in the application process, and hope to see you on the other side.